Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm super happy to come to Cyberthreat 2023. Really enjoyed 2022, and I thought put in a CSP and come and talk to you all about cybercrime intelligence. So let me grab the clicker. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about practical cybercrime intelligence. So one of the whole points of the SANS course we're creating is teaching people the best practices of how to investigate cybercrime, how to go onto the darknet a bit, and sort of venture off just consuming other people's research and sort of doing your own collection and things. So yeah, we've kind of gone through a bit of my intro, but you can find me online on Twitter, X, whatever you call it these days. So today, I want to teach you sort of practical lessons of how to do an investigation. I sort of did an investigation on my own, and I sort of put together the steps that I took to do that, and I would sort of basically want to help explain to other people how I did that, and then whenever you come across a cybercrime group, you can go and do that as well. So we're going to be navigating the darknet, breaking it down into sort of the sort of four quadrants of the diamond model, so adversary, infrastructure, capabilities, and their victims, and figuring out how to find that information. And then also sort of doing a bit of malware analysis, doing a bit of blockchain analysis, and sort of overall campaign profiling. So sort of each level of intelligence, strategic, practical, strategic, tactical, and operational as well. So some of you may have heard of a ransomware group called Ranion. They're kind of a low-tier cybercrime threat actor, but they have been consistently active since 2017. So they've managed to launch a successful campaign, in my eyes, if they've been running these attacks, supplying ransomware to other threat actors who use it for all sorts of different attacks. And they've never been caught. So I think they're a pretty successful threat actor in my eyes. So a bit of OSINT on Ranion, if you just looked them up on Google, you'd get things like a bleeping computer article, Fortinet page, a few other things. Not really a whole lot. And if someone asked you about them, you could provide 2 or 3 bullet points, but it doesn't really get much deeper than that. So I sort of wanted to provide information on how you can go deeper. So infrastructure. So what I like to do is actually go to the threat actor's Tor site, find it on the darknet. Well, I'm pretty sure all I did was go to some darknet search engine, Tor or Torch, or the hidden wiki or something like that. Searched ransomware, and bingo, the first one that popped up. And throughout this presentation, you'll be able to repeat the steps that I took as well. So what we do is when we go to the infrastructure, we extract information from that site, and then sort of add it to our sort of collection and build on from there. So we got their addresses, we've got their Bitcoin wallets, we've got their email addresses, and we've got file names of what the malware may look like elsewhere. So, for example, this is just a slide to show that they are ransomware as a service. They're sort of retro and dated looking now, but it's still effective, it's still operational. And this is a sort of C2 panel that the customers can come, or whatever you want to call them, cybercriminal clientele will pay, and this is what they get access to. They can manage their victims, addresses, and keys, and all that kinds of stuff. So one of the other ways I like to investigate infrastructure is by if in doubt, showdown it out. So, if I went to showdown and I put in the keywords .onion and Ranion, immediately IP addresses of Tor sites come up, because you can actually go to this IP address and see a Tor page. And I was like, okay, this is interesting. So this is potentially the back-end IP address of the Tor site. Potentially we could do a takedown. How has this operation been going 7 years and no one ever thought to do this? But actually, it turned out that this was a scammer's site. So, on the darknet, there's no honor among thieves. Classic phrase, rings very true to darknet cybercriminals. And so, yeah, you came to the scammer's site. The address is actually different from the original Tor site, but all the information is, the site's been cloned, and the scammer has just kind of changed a few things. They changed the original address. And said that's a scammer site, and then their address is the true one. And so it's kind of interesting to identify infrastructure and uncover other campaigns from doing that research. Another thing that I like to do to be able to extract capabilities is by reading what is on offer, or what the threat actors are offering for that ransomware, and then sort of going onto the MITRE attack and sort of lining them up together. And this may seem kind of an interesting or unusual way to do things, but the way that if you do this consistently with different malware families and different ransomware campaigns, you can actually figure out, okay, so the exact same TTPs are being offered by all of these groups. So this is something, multiple cybercriminals want, and this is something potentially, in some cases, when you map it to different malware families with different names and things, when you get all the TTPs, you can be like, okay, so these malware families are very, very similar because these, top 5 TTPs are all the same. So you can help categorize things that way as well. So the Ranion binaries, so, when we were on the Tor site, we saw the file name. When we take that file name, we look it up in malware submission sites like VirusTotal, we can actually uncover different ransomware binaries and hashes and things, so the samples. And then we can actually sort of extract information about those samples to help build up a picture of this sort of ransomware as a service. So the common file name between all these files was custom 2017. So it's, it's an old malware, as we've sort of established. But the sort of more recent upload, so even up in 2023, they sort of follow the same sort of naming scheme. So R44S, which is sort of leet speak for RAS, or ransomware as a service, and then the year, the month, and the day, and then some sort of code, probably victim ID or something like that, or just compilation ID. So the one after that is you take those binaries and then you look them up in other sandboxes, so such as AnyRun, which is a favorite of mine, and they have you can actually see additional information. So you can see domains that are connected to when you sort of detonate that sample in the sandbox. So again, you're gathering more information about their capabilities and their infrastructure. Then you can sort of pivot on those related files of those hashes in VirusTotal. And you can actually see, when I was doing this, I managed to find multiple samples all connected to the same file. And I say, what is this file? It was like a .cert file, which was actually a sort of a base64 encoded payload, which the threat actors will download. And the interesting thing about this is that even on VirusTotal, after 6 years or 7 years, it's still 0 out of 59 fully undetected or FUD. So the threat actor's not lying when he's saying his payload is FUD, which I found kind of funny. So cert util is Windows built-in binary, and the threat actor uses cert util to be able to download the second stage payload once the ransomware is deployed. So it's kind of like a two-step thing. You click execute, it downloads, and then runs. So we're gathering additional information about the capabilities and sort of how the ransomware actually works, which is actually kind of in a way, there's not actually many ransomware families that use this specific technique. So if you see sort of another ransomware that's renamed but does the exact same thing, you could potentially tie the two campaigns together. But yeah, so let's go on to the next one. So pivoting in VirusTotal, again, it's a great way to, as we all know, I mean, everyone in here probably loves VirusTotal as much as I do. But this is how I was able to link a campaign that's going since 2017 all the way up to 2023. And I don't work for some security antivirus or EDR vendor, so I can't see everything going on. But this is the way to do that. This is the way to actually track campaigns live and get more information about them. So let's actually look more into about the adversary themselves, the Ranion operators. So again, we go back to the Tor site, we gather information about what's offered on there, and they actually say that they're part of multiple forums. So they say they're part of Kickass, they say they're part of Onion Directory, Torum, Zero Day, and CryptBB. So what do you naturally do if you're a cybercrime intelligence analyst or data analyst? Well, you actually go to those forums and you see where Ranion has been mentioned. So the funny thing is, because this group is so old, all those forums, many of those forums have actually shut down. The last one that's still going is CryptBB. But there's a whole history of information there that we can gather about how this underground service is being offered and all the other cyber, sort of a life cycle. That's probably the most interesting thing about Ranion, is that you can see a life cycle from start to finish of a cybercriminal ransomware as a service. Which is still going to this day, but you'll see more information about that in a minute. So on CryptBB, their account type is a seller. They have sort of a junior rating, even though they've been around for a while. They have sort of decent reputation, and it was the sort of last profile that I could really find. So the Ranion operator on the forums. Interesting thing about some of the threat actors' posts, they're not actually really that active. They kind of use the forums to advertise their Tor site and get the cybercriminals to come to them directly, basically. So instead of using, a lot of these cybercrime forums use an escrow and guarantors. So you can, if you want to buy and sell things between each other, you don't just send Bitcoin to each other. You actually use a middleman that's sort of usually controlled by the forum. So Ranion was kind of trying to lure threat actors in a way to come to their site. And from looking at the sandbox submissions and things, we can see it does actually work. They have actually got some positive reviews. So the interesting thing about what was being said on the forums was that they really only posted a couple times a year, consistently every other year or once a year or so. And yeah, they just kind of slowly built up their underground reputation. So one of the interesting things that happened in August 2021 that I noticed was, because I have sort of views and telemetry and what happens on most of the forums and things, so the interesting thing about Ranion was that they sort of only posted on the English-speaking cybercrime forums, which kind of suggests that they are more likely to be a potentially English-speaking threat actor rather than classic Russian or Eastern European ransomware operator. However, in August 2021, about 5 or 6 posts suddenly popped up on some of the Russian-speaking underground forums, which is sort of very unusual for the threat actor to do that because it's not something they've really did before. And suddenly we had this burst of activity, and it wasn't on the normal forums that they're usually on. And then when I went to those posts, I realized it was actually the fake one. It was the fake one that we saw back on Shodan. So yeah, we actually basically uncovered how some of these scams come along and line things up with our previous investigation. And then eventually in September 2021, the OG operator, the original guy, actually came along and warned his customers about the scammers that he'd seen reported to him on the forum, using the forum account that is still going today on CryptBB. So the Ranion customers on the forums, this was sort of another way to find out more information about how the effectiveness of a program is by what the customers are saying. You want to see the customer reviews, the testimonials before you try something out. And it was kind of interesting because there's kind of a mixture of reviews. Some of them say, they really, really recommend it. The operator is a great businessman. He's very straightforward. And then some of them were actually even saying how they were spreading Ranion. And you can actually see the discussions in the forums as saying, one of the threat actors was saying, he uses fake Adobe Acrobat PDFs that are sort of hidden executables. He was explaining how he does that on the forum, and then you actually if you go into any run of VirusTotal, you do actually see that happening. So it's really interesting to see conversations happening on the forums and then samples appearing on sandboxes as well. So yeah, and then the other interesting thing that around mid last year, around June 2022, some of the threat actors were saying there's no point in getting this ransomware as a service anymore, even if it is the cheap alternative, because there's so many sort of leaked versions of ransomware that have come out that I'm sure we've all seen many sort of rebrands and customizations and things of, so like Babook, Conti, and Hidden Tear. So yeah, it's kind of, there's no real point of threat actors in many ways bothering to actually even pay for ransomware as a service when you've got all these leaked things going around anyway. So the other interesting thing I like to do is I have a sort of fascination with blockchain and blockchain analytics and actually tracing transactions of cybercriminals as well. And luckily for us, the threat actor, Ranion, actually adds his Bitcoin address onto his Tor site, which is not really the most advisable OPSEC if you're a cybercriminal, but it gives us really interesting insights when we're doing the investigation. And you can actually see where his customers and things have sent money to him and how much money they were sent, and they were kind of uniform in a way. So the total amount of money that was in there when I checked was about 1.8K, and the first transaction was in January, and the last transaction was in May. So if you times that by 7 years, tens of thousands of dollars potentially that this small project's making. So decent side hustle for whoever it is. But yeah, some of those transactions that appeared on Arkham, you can actually line those up with sort of tiered packages that were available on the Tor site. So you sort of can join the dots and be like, okay, so this is people who actually are trusting the cybercriminal, sending the money and getting the ransomware in return. So there was 4 test packages and 2 standard packages worth between a few hundred dollars at a time. So the victims. So how do you find out who the victims are of a ransomware campaign like this? So in some cases, many analysts, they may say, well, we saw the sample was uploaded to VirusTotal from these countries, so maybe this is where the victims are from. But there's so many sort of nuances that go into that. Maybe it's like an MSSP on behalf of a client, or maybe it's just someone who just came across it and uploaded it years later. Like you read it, it's not really the most reliable. Sometimes it's all you have, but it's not really the most reliable information in my eyes. So fortunately for ransomware, that actually does have quite a significant impact, and especially on sort of home individuals and small businesses and things. And people do sort of make noise and complain about it. So one of the things I like to do is go to Bleeping Computer forums, because it's sort of like a tech support forum, and people share ransom notes and ransom and file names and all sorts of things, and it's an amazing source of information. I've sort of come over the years, sort of made contacts with people that run Bleeping Computers, and whenever they hear about a new ransomware that's appearing on the forums and things, sort of first to know about it. So it's an amazing sort of crowdsourced form of intel of like Victimology. And then if we go to Ranion, we can actually see a couple of victims that actually say, here's the contact email address they added, here's the extension, and here's the Bitcoin address and things as well. So if you gather up all the sort of posts about Ranion, you can actually build up the email, the contact addresses that the threat actors add, and then the Bitcoin addresses as well. And let's go back into pivoting sort of blockchain analytics. And unfortunately for the threat actors, out of all of those addresses, they only made $80. So it's kind of a risky game for not that much of a return. But yeah, it was kind of fun. It's kind of a fun way to see both sides of it. You can see how much money the Ranion operator is getting. You can see how much money the affiliates are getting as well, just by using Barcom, which is a free platform. Anyone can sign up and have a look as well. So all that I've talked about so far, I've sort of broken it down into the 4 areas of the diamond model: adversary, capabilities, victim, and infrastructure. And if you actually listen to some of the talks today, that is how that's sort of like, this is the sort of secret analyst speaker, trade secret, is that we do end up breaking things down into these things anyway. Some of them do it without realizing it, but this is what they are doing. If you listen to some of the other talks today, see if you can put some of the things they're saying into these 4 brackets. And it's just it's a nice way to explain things. Analysts can understand it. Even sort of strategic level stakeholders can understand this. So that's sort of the favorite way of doing things for me. So hopefully you understand, sort of the process that I've sort of wanted to explain today was, firstly, there's multiple stages. So you've got discovery, interaction, going to the site and actually gathering information from the site itself, extracting that information, and then pivoting on it as well. Sort of researching and trying to understand more about what you found instead of just taking it at face value and trying to come up with an assessment. A lot of analysts, they like to think, they've been doing it X number of years and they can make a good hunch or a good educated guess. But actually, instead of, the first slide where I said is the bleeping computer and things, you can actually go and do that for yourself and do the collection, and you can cover all sorts of things. And you can sort of apply the methodology that I sort of spoke about and showed today to any number of threat groups, or malware campaigns, or ransomware groups, or initial access brokers, or carders, or whatever. This is the sort of process that I want people to understand. They can do it themselves, and the darknet's not as scary as people make it out. I think that's everything.